We spent an entire week talking about the skeleton key. We talked about Caroline ignoring every red flag imaginable. We talked about how her compassion became one of her greatest weaknesses. And we talked about Mama Cecile and Papa Justified, and whether they were always monsters, or whether the world they lived in helped create the monster they eventually became. And we talked about Southern Gothic horror, and how sometimes the past refuses to stay buried. But for my last word on the skeleton key, I have a confession. I love that ending. And if I'm being completely truthful, part of me was rooting for Mama Cecile and Papa Justified. Let me explain. I'm not saying these people were good people. Whatever sympathy I have for what happened to them in the past does not excuse what they eventually did to innocent people. But that's also what makes them such interesting villains. They weren't always the monsters of this story. They were two black servants living in the Jim Crow South who were brutally killed after being accused of practicing hoodoo with the children of the family they worked for. They were victims, but somewhere along the way, the victims became the victimizers. And by the time Caroline walks into that house, Cecile and Justify have apparently been playing this game for generations, taking bodies, taking lives, and continuing their own existence. And Caroline never stood a chance, because the genius of their plan is that they don't force Caroline to believe. They let Caroline convince herself. When she first enters that house, she's a skeptic. She doesn't believe in hoodoo. She doesn't believe in anything supernatural is happening. And we're repeatedly told that hoodoo only works if you believe. So what do Cecile and Justify need? They need Caroline to believe. And slowly, they give her just enough. The locked attic, the records, the mirrors. Ben desperately trying to communicate with her. Every new discovery pulls Caroline a little deeper. And eventually the woman who walked into that house saying she didn't believe, believes so strongly that she performs the same rituals that destroy her. Caroline thinks she's fighting back. She thinks she's finally figured out the game. But Caroline was playing checkers, while Cecile and Justify were playing chess the entire time. They knew her moves before she made them. Her curiosity, they counted on it. Her compassion, they counted on that too. Even her determination to prove that something was wrong in that house became part of their plan. Caroline thought she was uncovering their secrets, when really they were teaching her exactly what she needed to believe so they could take her body. And by the time Caroline finally realizes what game she's playing, checkmate. And then we get to those final few minutes. Caroline wakes up, trapped in Violet's dying body. Cecile is standing there inside Caroline, young again, healthy again. And Caroline can't tell anybody what happened. She can't explain that the woman standing in front of them, wearing her face, isn't her. That is horrifying. But there's another little conversation at the end that I find fascinating. Cecile talks about wanting a black body, and Justify explains that the black ones never stay. They're harder to make believe. And that one little conversation says so much, because belief is Cecile and Justify's greatest weapon, but it's also their greatest limitation. They can't simply take whoever they want. Their victim has to believe. And that's why Caroline's curiosity and compassion became so dangerous. She thought knowledge was going to protect her. Instead, knowledge made her believe, and belief gave them exactly what they needed. Then we get that final scene. Cecile is young again. She's in Caroline's body. Justify is continuing on in Luke's, and we get the jewelry, the eerie music, and then that photograph of the original Mama Cecile and Papa Justified. And I love that moment, because it almost feels like the movie is giving its villains a victory lap. They won. There's no last minute reversal. There's no surprise hero coming through the door. There's no justice for Caroline. The villains won. And I'm sorry. I love when a horror movie has the nerve to do that. Because 20 years later, we're still talking about that ending. And while I was rewatching this movie for this week, I kept thinking about another movie, Get Out. And I'm going to say it. The skeleton key walked so Get Out could run. Now, I'm not saying Get Out copied The Skeleton Key. These are two very different movies telling very different stories. But the parallels are so fascinating. Both stories deal with race. Both involve someone entering an environment they don't completely understand. And eventually, both characters discover that underneath everything happening around them, their body is the prize. Both movies also played with one of the most terrifying ideas I can imagine. Someone else taking control of your body while you're still conscious. But the racial dynamics are almost reversed. In Get Out, white people are still in black bodies. In The Skeleton Key, Cecile and Justify are black people whose story began in the racist Jim Crow South and who eventually survived by stealing other people's bodies. But there's one huge difference. Chris gets out. Caroline doesn't. Chris figures out the rules of the game in time to fight back. Caroline figures them out too late. And maybe that's why The Skeleton Key has stayed with me all these years. Because sometimes horror gives us the ending we want, and sometimes horror gives us the ending we're afraid of. Caroline was compassionate. She was determined. She genuinely wanted to save Ben. Those are qualities we normally celebrate in a protagonist. But in this story, those same qualities help destroy her. So yes, Mama, Cecile, and Papa Justify were wrong. Caroline deserved better. I absolutely feel sorry for her, and I'm still not changing my mind. I loved that ending, because the scariest part isn't that Caroline died. She didn't. She's still there. She knows exactly what happened. She knows exactly who stole her body. And she has to watch Cecile walk away, wearing her face. Now that is horror. And that's my last word on The Skeleton Key. But like I always say, don't play games you can't win. And I'll see you in the next nightmare.